Okay, so welcome back to the Pleasure Project with Dr. Jenn Kennedy. My guest today is Michelle Mays. I am very excited to have Michelle.
I'm
I
so
just
happy to be
just
here.
finished her book, and I am excited to kind of jump into a bunch of interesting questions about recovery with couples that are looking to build intimacy after recovery. So let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. She's a licensed professional counselor and an expert in treating sexual betrayal and trauma. She's the author of the new book, The Betrayal Bind: How to Heal When the Person You Love Most Has Hurt You the Worst. And she is the founder of Relational Recovery Institute in Northern Virginia. Michelle has created the attachment-focused partner betrayal model to address the devastating dilemma that betrayed partners face when their significant other is unsafe to connect to, yet is the key to healing. Michelle is a certified sex addiction therapist and supervisor. She was trained by PM Melody, who is wonderful,
Mhm.
in the post-induction therapy model for treating developmental trauma and is currently completing her PhD in clinical sexology. So that's also a fun club. And I love that, you're, again, both hats, because I wear both hats and I think it's
Yeah,
really incredibly valuable. Recovery is one side of it, but then also really being sex positive and being able to help the couples facilitate, a positive sex life. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
awesome.
So tell us, just to kind of jump in, tell us about your journey a little bit, like why this topic and how did you get here?
Well, so I came to the topic through my own story, as I think many, many people do. I went through my own relationship with somebody who was sexually addicted. And this was many, many years ago when there was not a lot of help and not a lot of resources. And often in my attempt to find help back then, I found people who really wanted to see me through the lens of my partner. They wanted to see me through the lens of addiction. They wanted to see me through the lens of codependency. It was sort of like they didn't want to see me and what was happening to me. They wanted to see me through a different lens, and often were not helpful in different ways and stuff. And so along my journey of trying to find help, I eventually found somebody who was able to really work with me and work with what was happening for me. But in that, like wandering in the wilderness and like trying to find the help, I came out of that experience just really feeling like, gosh, this is a huge population of people. I'm not alone. And we need much better models and thinking and understanding about what this experience is and what's happening for people. And so ended up going into private practice and working with couples, individuals who were the betrayed partner, individuals who were the sexually addicted partner, and then the couple, and often working with the entire system at one time because I happened to be the only person in my county who was a certified sex addiction therapist. So for about 5 or 6 years, I worked with the whole system all by myself. And I think that's a really unique work. I don't think it's for everybody, but
Yeah.
for me, it really helped me understand all the moving pieces and how they were impacting one another and that kind of thing. And so, along the way, I started the counseling center and coaching program and the different things, but all of it, all along the way, my thinking has been evolving about how do we treat this issue and create better models and better understanding around it.
I totally agree. Sorry, I got a little frog. I'm in a smaller market, and so I'm also in the position of treating all three units,
Yeah.
which is the betrayed partner, the acting out partner, whatever we want to call them, as well as the couple. Not typically in the same unit, but
Mhm.
at different times. And I feel like it's a tricky road to navigate, but I also really appreciate that you have that experience because you understand all three positions. And I feel like a lot of therapists are kind of entrenched in one side or the other. So
Mhm.
having that perspective and that compassion for everybody involved, I think is really helpful. And
Mhm.
also having an eye on the partnership and the
Mhm.
survival, if it makes sense, health of the partnership.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, it's a systems perspective,
Yeah.
right? In terms of looking at the whole system and understanding how every part is impacting every other part. And then, of course, the relationship, which is the thing that two people create between them. that's what a relationship is. So that's also part of the system. So I am grateful that I had all those years of that experience. I think it's informed my thinking a lot.
Well, and I see this oftentimes if people can get through challenges in life and be on the other side and then come and be of service in that area, that is
Mm-hmm.
so valuable, right? If you can sort of reclaim and repurpose that lived experience, then it's, you're coming from you're informed by theory, but you're also informed by having that lived
Mm-hmm.
experience. So
yeah, definitely.
so let's talk about the Braving Hope stages, because I want to sort of lay some foundation here for the couples that are listening, that we don't just jump over and start working on your sex life as a couple that
Mm-hmm.
have experienced infidelity. There's stages you're going to go through to get to the place where we're talking about, which is a little bit more advanced. So
Mm-hmm.
if you could lay out those, I know they're devastation, realization, and then stabilization. So talk us through each of those.
Yeah, and I would say also, just maybe even before I dive into that, like just explaining what Braving Hope is.
Great.
So Braving Hope is this concept, and we've named our coaching program Braving Hope. But the whole idea of Braving Hope is that in order to heal from betrayal, regardless of which position you are in the relationship, regardless of which side, you have to brave hope. You have to basically be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to go into territory that's new and outside of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to confront your fears and things that have been blocking you. And so all of that process of doing that, we call that braving hope, because you're allowing yourself to hope again for what might be possible, either for you individually or for the relationship or for both. So either one. So just to give you that kind of framework of what braving hope means. And then the phases of the process. So there's 6 phases to it. So the devastation phase is super self-explanatory. It's basically when the crap hits the fan and you go into the very complicated, very messy dynamics that happen when our attachment system and our threat response system are both highly, highly impacted by the loss of relational safety and threat in our relationship. So that is a devastating experience. It's a confusing experience. It's often blows people out of their normal coping in a way that they haven't experienced before.
And this is typically when partners discover that there is infidelity, right?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
But when it is discovered, both people go into this devastation phase, because so the partner goes in because their entire idea of what their life was and how they thought it worked and all of that is completely changed, and they're now in enormous fear and panic and all of those things. But the acting out partner also goes into the devastation phase,
Right.
because the relationship is now under siege and on the line often. Their attachment system reacts to that. They often have competing attachments. So they're both attached to their partner, and then they're also maybe attached to the affair partner or the behaviors that they're using to self-medicate and that kind of thing. So the devastation
so this is just
phase
chaos
is
and panic
for both
and
people.
yeah.
And then, of course, the relationship is like swirling in the middle of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like fear, confusion. There's just a lot of like everything's up for grabs and very, very like it's just like a lot of fear is kind of like the main.
I like the Jack Panksepp. I never can say his last name correctly. Panksepp, I think. He uses the word primal panic.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels so right to me. It's like, because it's a primitive, your attachment, because the relationship is threatened and this is your person, sets off primal panic in both people. And then all kinds of coping ensues to try to manage the primal panic. And then your coping is usually setting off more primal panic, and your partner back and forth and back and forth. And it's complicated. Yeah. It's a complicated phase for everybody to navigate, both individuals, the relationship, and the helpers, the people that are trying to work with it.
Right. So, and then couples move into realization.
So the realization phase is when you start to realize some things. So the realization phase is when you start to realize this is not going to be something that we just move on from, that we just get past or get over.
Mm-hmm.
We're now starting to realize, like, let's say you're dealing with traditional infidelity. A lot of people sort of feel like, well, my partner will quit doing that, quit having the affair, and turn back toward the relationship. Maybe we can kind of move on past this. And the realization phase is when people start to realize, actually, we're going to have to really heal. This is going to take some time. It's going to take some work. We're going to have to invest in a process. And
Mm-hmm.
so they start to understand the scope of the problem
Yeah.
in a different way. That starts to sink in. And then let's say you are realizing that, oh, my partner actually is dealing with sexual compulsivity
Mm-hmm.
and a whole pattern of sexual behavior that
Right, because
needs
things
to
are
be
starting to trickle
addressed.
out and they're
Yeah.
starting to
So now we're
understand.
realizing we've got a whole thing here that's going to require a certain kind of treatment. That's going to require a certain kind of process. So I
Yeah.
think the realization phase is really starting to get your mind and heart around what's happened and
Mm-hmm.
also what is going to be needed to be able to move forward, either individually or as a couple or both.
Right. So they initially in that first stage, sometimes there's minimizing that's happening, or there's
Mhm.
a level of denial that starts
Mhm.
to sort of lift in this stage when you start to see the larger picture and live with it day to day and understand this is a bigger, more complicated puzzle we have to address.
Yeah, and there's an interesting danger point in the realization phase, which is that I see this happen some, particularly I'm thinking of for betrayed partners. There's this danger point of starting to see it all and starting to get information about, oh my goodness, this is a bigger problem than I thought, or this is going to take more, and it's too scary. And so sometimes there's this, I'm going to pull away and move out of awareness about this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tuck away my awareness. We call this betrayal blindness. That's Jennifer Freyd's uh, conceptualization of when what we're aware of feels too scary and threatens our relationship. We sometimes will go blind to it because
Mm.
it's too terrifying. So
I,
there's a danger point in this
I
phase that you
also
won't do that.
I see sometimes couples having sex in
Hmm.
that blindness, right? Where
Yeah.
there's like a clinging kind of quality to it,
Hmm.
where it feels like they just want to find each other again, and so they're trying to just sort of, and yet there's mixed feelings about it. It doesn't. On the other side, it doesn't feel connecting. It feels like it's a behavior that you're trying to get access to safety.
Yeah, I'm with you. I call it the fantasy island honeymoon
Mm-hmm.
because it is a phase that a lot of couples go through. And I say this with no judgment. And I don't think you should have judgment for yourself about this because it's a super common phase. And often the couple is trying to reassert their bond
Yeah.
with one another. And they will swing into a lot of sex with one another, a lot of romance, a lot of intensity because they're trying to reassert the bond. Now, the acting out partner may also be trying to hide more.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, I'm going to show up and we're going to be part of this intense bubble. And hopefully that will distract from anything that's still hidden. So sometimes that's going on, sometimes that's not going on. And both people are trying to sort of reassert,
Mm-hmm.
like, we're okay, we're okay, we're okay, you know?
But also, I would
And
say the person who's acting out oftentimes has, in their own mind, really underestimated the scope of the problem. They've
yes.
compartmentalized, and so they don't actually see. They're starting to feel some panic because there's knowledge of what they're doing, but they
Mhm.
haven't really seen it as just like why they're doing it, and how they're gonna,
Mhm.
the difficulty of stopping doing it, and the need that it's been, addressing in them. And so it's a lot of.
Yeah, and there is sort of a stop the hemorrhaging
Mhm.
instinct. Like what is known is creating a massive panic in my relationship. So let's stop the hemorrhaging by hiding the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so all of that happens. I would say what I notice from most couples who go through this phase is that it's a phase and they come out of it because usually that intensity is not sustainable. And they start to realize that it's not solving the deeper issues, and the deeper issues are
Yeah.
still there. And they're going to have to it's sort of part of moving into that realization phase of like, actually, we're going to have to do some real work here. And this is starting to not feel good and not feel very safe.
Yeah.
And so that usually starts to die down and they start to settle into a longer term process of rebuilding and
Okay, so that takes us into stabilization. And tell us a little bit about kind of what that looks like.
So I think stabilization is the longest phase of the whole process, because this is when you've sort of recognized what the issues are, you've sort of committed to a process, and now you're going to do the work. And so this phase is when you're onboarding new tools, you're onboarding new information and understanding about yourself, about your partner, about your relationship. You're in a really steep learning curve, and you're also looking at what are the deeper things that block me from being able to develop new coping or being able to use tools. Because a lot of times, as therapists, we can be working with our clients and teaching them, let's teach you boundaries, or let's teach you how to use your voice effectively, or let's teach you these different skills, and then they're not doing them. They're not holding the boundaries, or not setting they're not using their voice. And often I think we miss that we now have to look at what's blocking that.
Yeah.
And
Like they're
often
not
there's
ready for
fear.
that. There's resentment, tremendous fear or resentment.
It's usually fear. It's very rarely resentment. It's usually fear. It's a fear of, if I call this the core self bind for betrayed partners in particular. If I say what's true for me, if I ask for what I really need, if I set a boundary, I might experience more loss.
Because they might
I've already
refuse
experienced a ton. Well, my partner might get angry at me. That is going to be felt as threatening. My partner might give me the silent treatment. My partner might say, no, I'm not going to go get help. I'm not going to work on this. I'm not willing to do any of this. So using the tools of recovery often requires you to be vulnerable in some way and take risk in the relationship. And often when we see people struggling to use their tools, it's because there's fear of what might happen if they do that. And then we've got to really work on that fear. We've got to kind of back up and slow down and really take a look at that.
Yeah. I definitely have seen some couples where the partner in particular just stays sort of in that heightened fear. And I think we're about to get into attachment. And I think that's probably, what's happening there. But stabilization is the goal, right? To get to that third stage, so that if the coupleship wants to continue, that there's sort of, I remember Esther Perel calls it like a 2.0 version, basically, of their relationship, right? They're not going back to who they were when they met. It's really a whole new version of people that can't unknow what has occurred, but are willing to, re-meet each other.
Yeah, you're not ever going back to pre-discovery. So you have to start to create something new, for sure.
Yeah. So you talked about in your book the sexual alarm system. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is a concept by Judith Levitt. I believe I've got that correct. So she wrote a book called The Sexual Alarm System, and I think it's a great read. It's kind of an interesting book because it's like 2 chapters explaining it, and then the whole rest of the book is all these exercises for helping you come back into your body and establish safety in your body. And what she talks about with the sexual alarm system really pertains mostly to females, though occasionally you'll have somebody who is male who also has this experience. And so the sexual alarm system is about the experience of being sexual prey in the world. So it's this dilemma of, as a female, I know that I am, in a smaller body, in a more fragile body. I am occupying a certain space around male bodies, and my body is also being evaluated, looked at, objectified, etc. And so women carry within them sort of this awareness of their vulnerability at all times. So I think Men walk into their car in a parking garage have a very different experience than women walking to their car in a parking garage, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so what she talks about there is if you've had experiences where you've experienced sexual abuse or you've experienced betrayal or if you've experienced threat, then your sexual alarm system that exists to kind of let us know, hey, we should be alert. We should be aware. We're in a situation where we're more vulnerable. That sexual alarm system can get stuck on
Mm-hmm.
so that it's kind of always on and you're always hyper vigilant and have a higher fear threshold around your sexuality. And I think for betrayed partners, betrayal hits that sexual alarm system
Right.
enormously. And some betrayed partners can get stuck in a place where it's like that alarm system is on and they can't even think about finding their way back to their sexuality because of it.
Right. Well, and this type of, if we're going to call it addiction, is different
Mhm.
than, say, substance addiction, because the nature of the acting out does feel so personal to the partner, right? It's different than when you're a spouse of someone drinking, which is also difficult. When someone's drinking problematically, but when they're having this type of betrayal, it feels, it hits the core, and often the betrayed partner just really struggles to open up again in that way for intimacy.
Yeah, I think it hits the core of identity.
Mm-hmm.
Our identity is very wrapped up in our sexuality and our how we feel about ourselves, our gender, or all the different things. So it hits that identity. It feels very personal what's happened. It feels like rejection, like somebody or something else has been chosen.
Yeah.
And then I would say also the additional layer on top of that is just working with the numbers of betrayed partners that I'm working with, particularly in our coaching program, and hearing so many stories. There is so much sexual injury that also happens. So often, when somebody is dealing with sexual compulsivity, it impacts how they are coming to the sex life in the relationship. And it often alters how they're approaching their partner. And so there's a lot of injury and damage from that as well, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to the cheating and what the infidelity piece of it has
Mm-hmm.
done in the relationship. So it's a multi-layered issue for a lot of people. And
Right.
there is a lot of trauma and a lot of fear around the sexuality as a result.
Right. Because sexuality is not just the action of sex, right? It's so much more than that. It's the
Mhm.
whole person and the identity and your expression. And to really be in an erotic space requires vulnerability and allowance. And that might feel extremely challenging for
Yeah.
anybody, but also certainly on the
Mhm.
heels of betrayal. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about attachment, because obviously that's sort of the framing of all of this.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of listeners know about attachment, and I have a quiz that I will attach here that people can take that is specifically
Okay,
attachment
good.
and how it predicts your sexual
Mhm.
behavior. But yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
So attachment related to betrayal,
Mm-hmm.
you about that? Or
Mm-hmm.
so I think the thing that is to me unique about betrayal and attachment is that, your long-term partner, when we pair up into long-term relationships, we become one physiological unit. So our partner regulates our heart rate, our blood pressure, our hormones, our breathing. Like we literally become like one unit together. And your partner is your primary attachment figure. So your primary attachment figure is the person who you want to be around them. You turn to them for comfort. You look to them. Like if you're in distress, they're the person you want to reach out for. And they're also a safe base to launch out into life from. So the unique thing about betrayal is that you're experiencing harm at the hands of the person who is your primary attachment figure.
Yeah.
And that's different from, I experienced something with a coworker, or I experienced something with a family member, or I experienced something with a friend, because those people may be very important to you, but they are not your primary attachment figure. They're not the person that you're in the bubble with and doing life with and are intertwined with. Your nervous system is intertwined with their nervous system. And that's what happens when we attach. We become intertwined. And so the dilemma of betrayal is that now this person who's your primary attachment figure is the source of danger for you.
Right.
But they're also the person who you would normally turn to for comfort.
Yep.
And so I call this attachment ambivalence, which is this phenomenon, and it's in the body, it's bodily based, and it has to do with our threat system and our attachment system coming into conflict. Because normally they sync up really well, and it's like, oh, I had a threat. Like something happened at work that stressed me out. Now I want to call my partner or text my partner. I want to reach out for my partner. And that's your threat system and attachment system working in sync. But when your partner is the source of danger, now your attachment system still fires and says, hey, they're your person. They're who you should reach to for comfort. And so you start to want to go toward them, even though they're the one that hurt you. But your threat system fires and says, hey, they're the danger.
Right. So it's a bind.
Get away from the danger. Yeah. And so often betrayed partners are in this like, I want to go close. I want to get away. I want to go close. I want to get away. I want to go close. I want to get away. And they confuse themselves. They confuse their partner. The relationship feels super confusing. And this is because of how our attachment systems work.
Yeah.
And are functioning, and then are now in conflict with our threat system. So two things are happening simultaneously in the body. And that is a unique dynamic that's unique to betrayal and betrayal in adult relationships.
Right. And so the acting out partner is trying to reestablish contact and connection with their partner, and yet there's this, both of them, both sides want to be close and also probably fear closeness on some level, right? I mean, I find that typically in the folks that I've worked with that are, like I'm more on the addiction side of things, is they're not particularly good at intimacy. Like that's
no,
right. We see it as an addiction, as an intimacy disorder.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, I think both partners are experiencing their own version of attachment ambivalence. So the betrayed partner has, you're the danger. I need to run or fight you to get away. And I'm in danger. I need you. So they also want to connect. So there's this two things. I think the acting out partner has also now the relationship is on the line. I'm enormously stressed. So my attachment is also saying, move close. You're my person too, Yeah. They also though have competing attachments. So they also have an affair partner, or they have acting out behaviors, and they're attached to those.
Right, because those have given them some degree of comfort or...
Yeah, there's an attachment relationship there. And so they are now sort of torn between primary partner and other attachment. And they can be bouncing back and forth between those two things while the betrayed partner is bouncing around as well. So again, it's complicated and it's complex, and it's super important to understand it so that you kind of understand the moves everybody is making in the relationship.
Right. And when each of the partners is seeing, I mean, seemingly contradictory behavior, right? Because it's like, there's a conflict going on inside the person. And so both are happening. And so it's confusing. So a lot of normalizing, a lot of like slowing down the system.
A lot of normalizing. Like, this is normal. Yeah. This is literally how your body is wired to respond to this situation. So normal to experience this.
And also I find that when couples come in right at the point of discovery, they are so not ready for this. They can't just jump to this stage, right? They can't just jump to recovery and repair. They have to go through the earlier stages. And so sometimes, like a partner, for example, really wants to get to disclosure right away, and we just can't do it because there isn't enough stabilization to do that and have it go effectively from either side. Maybe the partner isn't ready to hold that information, or the acting out person doesn't have enough empathy or awareness to, to, to be steady and to hold themselves
I would
when
say
that,
that, and they also maybe haven't resolved the competing attachments.
yeah.
You have to resolve the competing attachments, and then you also have to come to a place where you're willing to be honest
Mm-hmm.
about all those secrets that have been
Yeah.
part of the violation of the relationship agreements, but have been secret and hidden. And so that's a process to resolve the
Yeah.
competing attachments, to come to a place of really understanding and willingness to be honest. And so disclosure often takes a minute to get to,
Yeah.
because there's work to be done ahead of it.
Yeah. You say in the book that we need new experiences to create new pathways.
Yeah. So to me, if we think about a couple who has gone through the kind of the early stages of recovery and is starting to move into some of the healing work together as a
Mm-hmm.
couple, part of that is about having new experiences with one another that feel safe and where we register that there's safety. I often think that, trauma is almost like being cut off from safety, like your body doesn't know you've survived the incident
Mm-hmm.
and is still reliving it,
Yeah.
and is cut off from the awareness that actually you survived it and you're safe now. And so I think for a lot of individuals and couples, in their individual work and in their couple work, it's about having these new experiences of safety, but also letting it register,
Mm-hmm.
like letting yourself be aware that in this moment, things feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
and letting your body feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you feel it in your body, that's what really starts to create those new neural pathways.
Right. Because eventually, hopefully, the system starts to like have reprieve and have moments of maybe
Mhm.
some joy or relaxation or, around each other. And so it doesn't feel like, and so registering that there are
Mhm.
starting to present some more positive um, new experiences together
Yeah,
or
and
adjacent.
even yeah, absolutely. And even for couples who are earlier in the process, one of the things that I ask my betrayed partners to do, but also with couples to do,
Mm-hmm.
is to really think about, okay, maybe things feel really blown up between us relationally right now, but there are still some places in most relationships that feel safe still.
Mm-hmm.
And asking them to think about, what are the safe zones in the relationship where connection is possible and you can let yourself feel connected and help your nervous system with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you might be able to be like, I still parent really well with my partner. I co parent really well. We're on
Yeah.
the same page. We've always done that well together. So, we're going to keep doing this. And I'm going to notice that this still feels good and safe for me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm able to, like, still go on walks with my partner, watch a movie with my partner, go out to dinner with my partner, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to let myself do those things and notice that that connection is safe.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out, like, what parts of the relationship can you still lean toward?
Yeah.
And there may be a whole bunch of parts that you can't.
Right.
But usually there's some limited amount of that. And that really helps your nervous system calm down, because the biggest thing that helps our nervous system is connection with one another.
So also, like as we're shifting towards kind of the rebuilding of the erotic, you mentioned that the importance of having safety with self first before
Mhm.
safety with partner. So talk about safety with self and how does that manifest?
So if I'm thinking about that in terms of particularly the sexual relationship, what I notice, and when I notice, I'm thinking especially about the betrayed partners that I'm working with in the coaching program that we have. And they're different ages. The ages range. Most females, like we have men come through, but majority female. And over and over and over again, the experience of the majority of the people, the majority of the females, is that they have never really claimed their sexuality for themselves.
Yeah.
In our culture, if you're female, you're really told that your sexuality exists in service of male sexuality. And you sort of exist for, for the purposes of
Mm-hmm.
satisfying male sexuality. And so most of these women have never had the experience of actually thinking, oh, my sexuality belongs to me and it's here for me regardless of whether I have a partner or not, regardless of whether I'm engaging in partnered sex or not.
Yeah.
This is part of who I am, and I actually need to figure out who am I sexually and what does my sexual expression look like? And what do I enjoy and what do I not enjoy? What makes me feel beautiful? What makes me feel sexy? What arouses me? What, like, sorting all of that out.
Yeah.
Often what they have done is they have allowed their partner to tell them what is true for them, or they've just prioritized and elevated their partner's preferences
Yeah.
and have never sorted out theirs. So that piece of sorting this out for themselves. And it's always amazing to me because we have like a whole bunch of like there's modules that they go through in our coaching program about this. And still on the calls, on the coaching calls where they're getting coached, they over and over and over again, they're like, but I'm not having sex with my partner right now. So how does this apply to me?
Right.
And
Right.
it's so fascinating to me because I'm like, no,
Yeah.
the
Well,
whole
this and
point
and and what
is
you just said actually I think applies to women in general.
yes, 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 yes.
Not just women that have gone through the betrayal experience, but yeah,
No.
it's like, and it's women of a certain age, I would say too. Younger women seem to be a little more in tune with what they want, but certainly I would say women over 35 are
Mhm.
not used to asking that question or
They are not.
prioritizing their own pleasure.
It's a
And
foreign idea.
yeah,
Mhm,
so knowing what they like entertaining sort of like what are their fantasies or what are their preferences,
mm.
knowing those so that they can articulate them and they can set boundaries around them and that type of thing is a totally new skill.
Totally new skill. There's a lot of permission giving that
Hmm.
needs to happen, and I think if you're working with this population to think about how you can be a real permission giver
Hmm.
in terms of giving people permission to own their sexuality, claim it for themselves, like know that like I always talk to my folks about like healthy sexuality is two people like fully knowing who they are and bringing their authentic selves and co-creating a relationship, a sexual relationship. And
Yep.
if you don't know who you are, how can you co-create? So really having the permission to figure that out and to not continue to default to your partner
Yeah.
instead. Another
And
question
this
that I
and this
hear,
happens with both men and women. I want to just be clear too. I definitely have
yeah.
male
Mhm.
partners that are in this population that are also sort of struggling to assert or to maybe they've been more people pleasers or
Mhm.
and so I want to make sure we're inclusive of both both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea that knowing your own kind of arousal template, understanding what really like excites you, interests you, pleases you. Let me say it that way, pleases you in a more global way,
Mhm.
and then involving yourself with partner. Because likely in this duo, there hasn't been I mean, occasionally I do have couples that are coming into recovery that have had a great sex life. But typically it's not super connected. It's more like skillful and getting off. And so this couple now, is most couples are in a place and those couples too of really having a new
Hey,
experience of
Jen, can I
intimacy.
stop you?
Yeah.
Can I stop you? You
Yeah.
froze, so I have no idea what you just said.
Oh, okay.
You froze and it stopped. Sorry. Can you go
Okay.
back to can we start over with what you were
Yeah.
just saying? 'Cause I
Yeah,
missed
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay.
No, I'm thinking like I definitely have some couples who have had a good sex life. Like they've come in and they've
Mhm.
had
Yeah. Yeah.
please like pleasurable sex, but they
Mhm.
haven't really had connected sex necessarily because there was tension or sometimes resentment or um whatever there. The majority of the clients I would say that are in recovery have not ever really had a very good sex life with one another. There hasn't been a lot of communication or vulnerability in this way to really have intimate sex, I would say.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think I see clients too who really are like, no, I feel like we had a really good sex life. And then that does seem to be more about increasing the connection and authenticity and vulnerability even more. But I think for the couples who haven't had that, it's learning a whole new skill set for both people. It's really both people thinking about what happens if I share who I really am with my partner,
Mm-hmm.
or if I come and I'm really authentically present. Just presence in and of itself, if you think about just presence sexually, is vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It requires vulnerability just to be present, and just learning how to do that can often be a big skill
Yeah.
for people, because they may have known how to have sex with one another and do all that, but not be fully present. And that's a form of guarding,
Mm-hmm.
that happens. So there's a lot of skill building and learning for both people in the relationship as they learn to heal and come together to do something different and co-create something new with one another.
Yeah, and I see it more as like scaffolded learning.
Mhm.
They try something out, they take a little bit of a risk, they get a feedback loop, they they feel accepted by partner, they have some playfulness in there, and they
Yeah.
start to regain a little bit of self and traction in this, versus trying to be the best lover out of the gates, because that's not going to happen, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think the other thing I really love about that image of the scaffolding is that I think that's how you're also creating safety, because you have to, like I often say, I think for some betrayed partners, they get stuck in this, I'm not going to re-engage sexually until there's enough emotional safety in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And there does need to be a certain level of emotional safety. I have no argument with that. Like, I totally agree with that. But sometimes I think there can be this thing where it's like, somehow there's going to be enough emotional safety that this doesn't feel risky or scary at all to me. And for those folks, what I always want to say is the way that sex becomes safe again is that you have safe sexual experiences.
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to feel safe, and let's say your partner has done all the work and they're leaning in relationally and you're building intimacy with one another emotionally, but you're still kind of sitting over here sexually, then the way to safe sexuality is to start to build those experiences together. And you may have to start slow and start,
Mm-hmm.
baby stepping your way there.
Yeah.
But that's how it's when you have an experience of, oh, my partner and I laid next to one another naked and just held one another. That would be
Mm-hmm.
like a baby step, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that felt safe.
I mean,
Now I'm
initially
having a
it's
safe
even
experience.
witnessing like nakedness, right? It's
Yeah,
even seeing
yeah,
like you undress again. It's having all of that, like slowing it way down and starting to feel
way,
like
way down.
you can be witnessed, you can feel you can feel some desire, you can also express some fear or trepidation and have that be acknowledged. And
Mhm.
and kind of sorting through that together, because again, you're in this as a team. It's not like one of you
Yes,
is great and one of you
yes,
is not. It's like having.
100%. Like, you have to both be in it with one another. And then again, like, it's such a step by step process, but
Mhm.
every step along the way is what builds those new neural pathways
Yeah.
back to feeling safe. And eventually that safety builds to the point where play can come back in,
Mhm.
because we can't play when we feel fear.
Yeah.
And sex is a form of play, but often we have to start kind of back here where maybe there's not as much playfulness, and build to the point where we feel safe enough to engage playfully with one another and that kind of thing again.
Right. So not just pushing through at all, but
No.
play, or at least like a tenderness and a presence.
Hmm.
Sometimes that works too, vibrationally. I like sensate focus as a sort of
Yeah.
very introductory way of getting couples who have not had intimacy in a while kind of reacclimated. to at least some basic touch. And initially, like even like level 1, they don't have the responsibility of talking and interacting and giving direction, and it's too much. It's too many skills, so
It's
starting
too much.
level
Yeah.
1.
I love that too. I love sensitive focused as well. I think it's a beautiful starting point, and it's not just a great starting point for the couple, but it's actually a great starting point for both individuals to just start to learn how to inhabit their body,
Yeah.
be present, and then also how do I inhabit my body and be present with another person present? Those are two different skills,
Mhm.
and really learning how to do that in a really slow, gentle way with you and your partner. I think it's a really great.
I also find that couples that are in this space who are trying to re-engage, it's like their threat response is heightened. And so they're looking for
Yeah.
any sort of what they perceive as rejection, in terms of
Yes.
expression. Maybe nothing even got said, but they like,
Mhm.
oh, you don't like that, or what am I doing it wrong? Or, it's like everything is like volume is turned up so high
Yeah. Yeah.
that it's because they're scared and because they don't feel particularly skillful in this
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's super common that I hear all the time is for the partner who's dealing with the betrayal, they are coming in and experiencing flashbacks often. So they have intrusive images from about the cheating or the acting out that has gone on, that the vulnerability of leaning in often triggers those
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts and flashbacks to come in. And so that's a big hurdle for couples to work through and to deal with. And, you know, part of the challenge with that is to not push through. So, what I see happen for a lot of betrayed partners is they're sort of like, well, we're in a moment. I don't want to interrupt the moment. So, I'm just going to kind of suck it up and get through it. And
Yeah.
yet, what that does, if you are for the betrayed partner, what it does is it gives you another unsafe sexual experience.
Hmm.
So you're now having a sexual experience that doesn't feel safe because you're just sort of gritting your teeth or dissociating or
Yeah.
somehow managing to just get through the sex act versus figuring out how to be present and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think that piece is really big deal for a lot of people. And it really requires you to team with your partner and to really say, hey, this is an us problem.
Hmm.
The circus doesn't come to town in my mind for no reason,
Right.
right? This has to do with what happened. So
Yeah.
this is an us problem and we have to solve it together.
Yeah. Because there's
And
gonna be
so when
setbacks. You might even have a
yeah,
good experience, and then you have a flashback, or you have
and
some
then you
sort of
have it
trigger,
again.
and then you take a few steps back. That's just
Yeah.
part of the deal.
And I think if you slow it down and you share, here's what's happening for me,
Yeah.
like this is and then your partner is able to be with you and
Yeah.
say, how can I help you come back? How can I help you be here?
Yeah.
I get it. I understand why this is happening. How can I be with you? You can weather that thing, that experience in a really different way that actually creates some healing, versus when you just push through the moment, you just suspend the problem.
Yeah. I will also say too, couples that come out on the other side and choose to stay together and choose to work on their intimacy, boy, they have such a foundation, because they've likely been together a while. They've got a lot of history, but they've also chosen each other once again, and so there can be a real
Mhm.
strength in that, and just a transparency is required. Being in that after space,
Yeah,
and so their relationship looks very different than other couples.
it really does. And in many ways, I feel like it's much healthier.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there's a different level of intimacy and commitment to working on it together
Yeah.
than I see, just for like a couple who hasn't gone through that. And the process of recovery requires you to grow
Yeah.
in ways that really moves your relationship to a different place if you do stay together and do that work with one another.
Yeah.
It's really fun to watch it and to witness
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
I
And
enjoy that.
and I just feel like these couples are so brave because coming in to share their story with their therapist and to work through this and unpack all the stuff, and then come week after week to like try to put it back together. Like I honor that because it's a lot of
Oh my
vulnerability
word.
and work. Yeah.
A huge amount. And it's like some of the stuff that they are trying to overcome together is, just enormous amounts of betrayal, enormous amounts of big histories of trauma,
Yeah.
all the different things. And yeah, the level of commitment and the level of work and bravery and courage is really inspiring.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. I think this is, we
Yeah.
talked about this offline. This is such an important topic, and I don't feel like it gets enough attention. So I want to help, not just the couples heal through the betrayal process, but also come out on the other side and have a vibrant, connected sex life. So,
Yes, absolutely.
so
Thanks for having me.
you can find Michelle at michellemays.com as well as relationalrecovery.com. She's on Facebook, she's on Instagram, she's on YouTube. So we'll click all those, or we'll add all those to the, to the show notes. And you've also got a coaching program. So it sounds like if someone's not located in your state, they can still find you
Yeah.
and work with you.
Mhm.
So that sounds great. Thanks again.
Yeah.